I'm excited that it's a first year. I'm excited that we won't be here until 12 a.m. I don't think so. I don't think so. It's a reading, bro. Manifesting that. Hopefully. Stop. I just do. I love the new outside LST video. That was awesome. I was crying watching that. I love how you guys do that every year. Like, it's always good.
Do you know what I care about?
Yusuf.
Do you know I texted Yusuf before like application process?
You see the south side stuff? Yeah. I'm glad. No, everyone told me Yusuf so much. So you're my crush that red LST. I'm so excited. It's so nice when you see them grow up.
I know. Do you have any thoughts when you're like LSC?
I'm a Mason right now.
That's crazy.
I know. Because our dream was to both get Delhi. Because we're both from Delhi. And we both got
Rosh is a two-time
next year, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if she can do it because she's law school. So she might not be able to do it. Yeah. But I'm amazed to have two more that got it this next year. It's such a nice feeling. It's like, I love watching them grow up. And when they love something, it makes me so happy. But you ate it up. Your frosh was really amazing. Yusuf.
I love Yusuf was my favorite. Sorry.
No, it's okay. I have favorites too. I think as long as you don't say it out loud and you don't show it, but you obviously have one. I'll tell him though. I'll let him know. See ya.
Mari, you know what you owe me for that? Convincing Jacqueline to give me the conference room access.
Have you not talked to Jacqueline?
No, I haven't.
Oh, okay. I would say. Listen, if I
Or like the coordinators somewhere to do this.
if I had that ability, I would give it to you. But that I'm not USC affairs, you know. But I wish you know the amount of power I would have if I could give card access. I know they actually had to cut back and restricted the execs from having some card access, like because they used to be able to open up the Mustang Lounge and like other places, and now we can't do that anymore.
North America.
Okay, counselors, if we want to have a seat. Welcome, everyone. The time is now 7:12 p.m. on November 27th. I now call this meeting to order. We will first hear a land acknowledgement from Vice President Menon.
Hi, Council. As the semester wraps up and we all look to finals, I would like to take this time to understand the role academic institutions have played in upholding colonial violence and white supremacy. As we are all university students, we are all part of a system that historically discriminates against Indigenous peoples. Taken from Western's Guide on Working with Indigenous Students, Western's founding college had very strong religious ties. These religious roots are connected to colonial missionizing efforts and Eurocentric models of education that were aimed at assimilating Indigenous peoples. Additionally, early Western research practices also contributed to the mass collection, misinterpretation, and othering of Indigenous peoples across many disciplines. While the modern Western University has reformed over the last 30 years to become more open to Indigenous peoples, Indigenous students continue to face struggles inside the university for many systemic reasons. Up until the 1960s, Indigenous people had very limited access to, and in turn, participation in Canadian universities. This was because Indigenous people were historically and legally prohibited and excluded from participating in universities and degrees in Canada. The Indian Act, for example, used to promote that those who attended university would be stripped of their status Indian and their right to remain in their communities. To put that into perspective, my dad was born in 1960, as I'm sure many of your parents were as well, meaning that our parents were alive and well when this act prevented Indigenous students from obtaining post-secondary degrees. So while you keep that in mind, please keep in mind that we are all treaty people. By this, I mean that if you live on a land that's governed by a treaty, you are a treaty person. Whether you are new to Ontario or your ancestors came here many, many years ago, you are a treaty person. As a child of immigrants, as I'm sure many of you are, it's important to acknowledge how despite not having ancestral ties to colonialism, we are still privileged to call Indigenous lands our home. So while we reflect on our relationships to this land, I hope that you keep the statistics and facts in mind as you continue your journey at university, as well as all of your time on Turtle Island. With that, we would like to acknowledge that Western University is located on the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Lenape-Wauk, and Chinungtung nations on lands connected with the London Township and Samba Treaties of 1796 and Dish with One Spoon Covenant Wampum. And we acknowledge as staff and students of the post-secondary institution to contribute towards revealing and correcting miseducation, as well as renewing respectful relationships with Indigenous communities. Thank you.
We will now hear the Western Fight Song. Counselors, please head to Echo 360 to record your attendance. The session ID is noted in the agenda. All right, so before we move to approve the agenda, I'm just going to go over the agenda items. So the agenda includes the following. We first have approval of the agenda and the minutes, followed by comments from the chair, myself. We will have a board of directors report by Mr. Barry. We move into our 4 action section afterwards, which will include the election of a counselor to the board of directors nominating committee, the election of a counselor to the Purple Care trustee hiring panel, and the motion to ratify the updated standing committee membership. After those motions, we will hear a first reading of the motion to approve the USC pedestrian safety and transit position paper and the motion regarding human rights-based divestment. Our Part 2 meeting will include executive presentations and the motion for their approval, as well as a second reading and voting on the 2 outstanding motions. Before we move to approve the agenda, are there any questions regarding the agenda of this meeting to be made at this time? Are there any amendments or points of debate to be made? Finally, are there any objections to the agenda? Seeing as there are no further questions, amendments, or objections, do I have a mover to approve this agenda? Councillor Lee, and can I have a seconder? Councillor John. We will now move to Echo 360 to vote on the approval of the agenda. All right, the motion passes. We will now move on to the approval of the minutes. Can I please have a mover to introduce the motion? Councillor Bennett, and a seconder, Councillor Matasako. Are there any questions regarding the minutes? Are there any amendments to be made at this time? Are there any objections to the minutes?
Very quickly, my name.
Oh, thank you. All right, if there are no questions, amendments, or objections to the minutes, we will continue with the minutes as approved. So please move to vote in Echo 360. The motion passes. Okay, so just a few updates and reminders before we get started. So this meeting is a 2-part meeting structure. So this is our first 2-part meeting of the year, and it's designed to include a first reading of 2 of the motions, which is the pedestrian safety paper and the human rights-based divestment motion. A first reading is for introducing and reviewing motions. Tonight is your chance to ask questions and better understand these motions, but debating, objecting, or amending them will take place at the second part of this meeting on December 4th. We'll be voting on some motions tonight and others at the December 4th meeting. This structure allows council time to consult with constituents, so whether that be your faculty councils as well as just greater constituents, and gather feedback on discussion-heavy topics. Executive reports will also be deferred to the next meeting, as some executives are away attending advocacy events this week. The next reminder is that we will be having offered to counselors is professional photos on December 4th. So at the Part 2 meeting, Kurt and the USC creative team will be on site from 6 to 7 p.m. So that's the hour before the meeting next week, where you can have the chance to drop in and get your professional headshot taken. So if you'd like one, just please make sure that you're arriving early to that. Next we have, so tonight's meeting and the December 4th session will conclude council's business for this semester. And then our next council meeting will be on January 22nd. The call for agenda items, I will send out a reminder about, and you can also refer to the legislative calendar, but those are from January 6th to 13th. Just a point of clarification, so the hiring committees, so the election for the hiring committee for the Purple Care and the nominating committee for the board of directors are to select representatives who will sit on the hiring panels. It's not for the roles themselves. And then finally, just a reminder that our land acknowledgement sign up is still open and live, and we are looking to fill up a few spots next semester, so I highly encourage anyone to sign up to do the land acknowledgement. Once you sign up, you'll get a confirmation from me, and then you're set for doing the land acknowledgement. All right. Thanks, everyone. We can move on. All right, I now call up Mr. Barry to provide a board of directors report.
Hello, everyone. So for this cycle, much like what you guys are doing now, our board of directors meetings got split into 2 different meetings, basically just because there was a lot of stuff to go over. So I'm just going to go through essentially what happened at our first meeting, which took place on November 1st, and then I'm going to go through what happened at November 8th meeting as well. So starting with November 1st meeting, we went through our 2024 fiscal year audited statements. So Depeche Parma, who is our partner who we work with at PwC, who's in charge of our audit, presented the audited statements for the 2024 fiscal year. Overall, it was their opinion that the financial statements were presented fairly in all material respects. The financial position of the organization as of May 31st, 2024, and the results of its operations and cash flows for the year then ended are in accordance with Canadian accounting standards for a not-for-profit organization. There were only 4 items that needed to be adjusted as a result of the audit, which is actually quite impressive. And that had to do with essentially the following. One is late recognition of expenses. Essentially, some expenses that were incurred in the 2023 fiscal year made their way into the 2024 financial year, essentially just because the vendor didn't give us an invoice. There's nothing we can really do about that. If they choose to give us an invoice a year later, we can't really estimate the cost, and then the second thing was the internal revenue recognitions, and that essentially was internal revenue expenses were recognized during the 2024 financial year relating to InfoSource, but they were just put into different financial line items, and they should have been different ones. But that is all fixed now. In both instances, management has noted the deficiencies and will try their best to respond in the future. However, like I said, especially with that late recognition of expenses, one that's going to be very difficult just because that's kind of out of our control. But overall, PwC has no significant internal control deficiencies to report. And furthermore, there was no fraud or additional illegal acts that were detected during the course of the audit. So that is very good. Moving on, we had our HR committee report presented by Kyra Hiles. Unfortunately, we had one of our directors resign, Emma Ouellette. She was a first-year director, so she was doing this term, and then she was also on board for the next year, which is the 2025-2026 year. And basically, that's left a vacancy on the board of directors. At this point in the year, we've already completed all of our training at BOCO, and then the board of directors, like the summer retreat that we do, as well as the winter retreat that we do, which is all educational sessions. To get somebody actually through the process of hiring the applications and stuff like that, and then as well as training them up to speed as the rest of the board is right now, I just don't think it would be beneficial. It would probably be probably close to like March or so before they started to actually benefit the discussion at the board level. So it's been my decision that I think we just roll with the ones that we have. I'm really confident in the directors that we have as well, so I'm happy with that decision. But that does leave a bit of an issue because Emma was the director who resigned. It leaves a vacancy on the HR committee at the board level. That's been filled by one of our directors, Alex Faffey, who's agreed to take on that role. There was a vacancy on our EDI committee because she's our board representative on that, and that position has been filled by Director Michael Haas. And then there's obviously the vacancy from the 2025-2026 year, and that has actually been filled by Director Grace Wu, who will actually be returning as a third term on the board of directors. So everything is good on that front. We had another HR committee on the November 8th meeting. I'm just finishing off the back half of the HR stuff. This isn't really mean too much to you guys, but I think it's cool, so I'm going to present it anyway. Basically, we discussed how the COO, Jeff Armour, is going to lead the development of the staff culture plan. This is essentially aiming to align staff with the organization's missions, vision, and values. Jeff has introduced this project as a key initiative for enhancing staff retention and fostering a stronger sense of community within the USC. I'm going to give you a bit of a summary of what that looks like. So he's agreed to meet individually with every USC full-time staff member to discuss challenges and opportunities, and he's going to do that by March 31st, 2025. And then on top of that, there is a completion of strengths coaching sessions for each full-time USC staff member and conduct USC Department one-day retreats. And the deadline for that is August 21st, 2025. And then facilitating department workshops in the spring/summer of 2025 in order to align and socialize the USC staff culture plan and strategic documents. So a lot of work is going to be put into kind of making the full-time staff feel like they're a part of this mission and the values that we present ourselves with in an effort to kind of boost our retention rates, which I think is a really good idea. And then on top of that, we also altered some of the COO performance appraisal systems. So the main reason for this is that usually the year-end performance appraisal for the COO was presented at our summer retreat, our BOCO is what we call it. That also is the first day that the new class of directors is actually like doing something, which kind of poses a bit of an issue just because they haven't had the opportunity to work with Jeff at all, really. So we've moved that back. And so we're going to have the performance appraisal for the year end. It's actually going to be presented to the board in April. And that way, all of the directors that are present for the performance appraisal have worked with Jeff. And so that we're not dealing with that weird, there's a couple directors who actually haven't had the opportunity to work with them. So I think that's good. And then also just on top of that, usually the performance appraisal is done by the president of the organization. And this is the first year that the chair of the board of directors is going to be kind of involved in that process, and we've been working on that already. Just to kind of ensure that the PA is completed to the quality that the board expects, just because, you know, the Jeff is our sole employee, so it is very important that we are very confident in the performance appraisal. Moving on to the Finance Committee reports, and this was presented on the November 8th meeting. As I mentioned during the first board report earlier this year, our Finance Committee has kind of evolved a bit. The biggest change that we've seen so far is that we're reviewing the financial statements on a quarterly basis. This past quarter outperformed projected profit by about 67%. And like, I know that sounds big, but it's not actually a great representation of where we are at. Just because it has to do with when the student fees were landed. So essentially what happens is Western gives us the student fees in kind of a tranche. There's 6 of them throughout the school year, but expenses that we incur are all year round. So it's not like as if there's, you know, we get this tranche now and then this is what it's allocated to. So it's kind of interesting because when you look at it from the actual, like the bare bones of it, we just got the fees related to the bus pass and the health and dental plan, and that was recognized in this period, which we don't really project for, just kind of whenever it landed. And the reason why the profit is so high right now, or the profit margin is so high, is just because, you know, none of the expenses related to those fees have actually been accrued yet. So not to worry, but overall the organization is in a very healthy position. In terms of the governance committee report, so at the summer board retreat, the CRO submitted a report containing recommendations for policy changes. The board voted to approve these recommendations and directed the CRO to develop policy responses to provide clarity around acceptable spending and alcohol use in campaigns and stuff like this. So we received this policy response, and the major adjustments were essentially followed. Not really major adjustments, basically just refined language and add clarity and specification to certain things. One of those things being the updating the campaign reimbursement procedures to kind of rein in some of that unproductive spending. And basically that just means that essentially if you want to be reimbursed for an expense, it does have to be a campaign specific expense. Whereas before some of those guidelines were a bit hazy. So we're just kind of refining those down. And then also there is a elections violations procedure thing that was changed. It added kind of, before there was like a line that you could withdraw your complaint and like basically the USC wouldn't investigate or whatever. But that's since been kind of adjusted, so added a withdrawal of complaint section under the committee that gives the committee the ability to investigate even if a complaint is withdrawn. Just so essentially there's no kind of, I guess there's no, it reduces the chance that people are going to be like, I guess, bullied out, like withdrawing their complaints. So I think that works out well. And then on top of that, it's just minor wording and phrasing changes that are just to keep up with the language of today. That's really everything that I wanted to cover. If there was any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Looks like we're good. Cool. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Mr. Barry. All right, we will now move on to our for action section of the meeting, starting with the motion to elect a counselor to the Board of Directors Nominating Committee. The motion reads, be it resolved that council elect one counselor to sit on the Board of Directors Nominating Committee. Can I please have a seconder for the motion? Councillor Chai. Are there any questions regarding the motion? Are there any points of debate? Are there any objections? All right. Okay, seeing as there are no questions, amendments, or objections, we can proceed to the election. So each nominee will have 2 minutes to explain why they think they would be a good fit for the hiring committee, followed by a question period if anyone has questions. Alternatively, you can waive your speaking rights. Can I have all the nominees who wish to be considered raise their hands? Councillor Triantafilakis. Okay, thank you. Seeing as this election is unopposed, there will be, you're not required to give your speech. It is up to you, Councillor.
Come say hi. Come on. Hey.
Okay.
Might as well put this to some use. So excited for how competitive this is going to be. Anywho, I'm excited to be running to sit on the Board of Directors Nominating Committee. This role presents a unique opportunity to contribute to the future leadership of the University Students' Council, ensuring that we select individuals who are not only highly capable, but also committed to representing and serving our student body. So my experience as the president of the Faculty of Health Sciences Student Council has equipped me with leadership, empathy, and communication skills necessary for this role, leading a team of over 60 and collaborating with 5 vice presidents and multiple association presidents has allowed me to balance diverse perspectives while making strategic decisions. My ability to advocate for students during key moments such as the transition for Brescia students to main campus demonstrates my dedication and fairness to inclusivity. As a member of the nominating committee, I'll bring the same diligence and thoughtfulness I apply to my role to student governance and mentorship. My skills throughout leadership and academic research will enable me to evaluate candidates effectively, ensuring that we recommend directors who embody the values and mission of the USC. I believe my commitment to fostering collaboration and my understanding of the governments makes me an ideal fit for this position, along with my background that I've hired many students throughout my years on council. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Councillor. We won't have a candidate question period, given the nature of this election. Okay, we can now move to ratify Councillor Triantafilakis. Can I please have a mover? Councillor Saha. And a seconder, Councillor Vanderloot. Are there any questions at this time? Are there any amendments? Are there any objections? Okay, please proceed to Echo 360 to vote on the motion. The motion passes. Our next motion is the election of counselors to the Purple Care Trustee Hiring Panel. The motion reads, be it resolved that council elect 3 outgoing, non-returning counselors to sit on the Purple Care Trustee Hiring Panel. Can I please have a seconder to introduce the motion? Counselor, sorry, I can't see it. Sharma? Okay, Counselor Sharma. Are there any questions regarding, or sorry. Yes, sorry. Are there any questions regarding the motion? Are there any points of debate? Are there any objections? All right, so we can proceed to the election now. So similar to the last one, each nominee has 2 minutes to explain why they think they would be a good fit for the hiring committee, followed by a question period if anyone has questions. Can I please have all nominees who wish to be considered raise their hands or their placards? Counselor Sharma. Counselor Smith. Counselor Saha. Okay, thank you, counselors. Yes, counselor.
Sorry, just a point of information. Could you quickly define non-returning counselors?
Sorry, can you repeat that, please?
Of course. Just as a point of information, can you quickly define what you would consider a non-returning counselor or outgoing?
Yeah. If you are not running for re-election in the winter election period. Are there any questions about that? No problem. Okay. The counselors that nominated themselves, if you would like, you are welcome to give the addressment, but it is not required as we do not have, or as there are 3 available seats. Would you like to come up or not? I'll take the silence as a no. Motion to ratify, and then questions, objections. Okay, we can motion to ratify the counselors that nominated themselves. Can I please have a mover, Counselor Smith, and a seconder, Counselor Thompson? Are there any questions at this time? Are there any amendments? And are there any objections? Okay, please proceed to Echo 360 to ratify the decision of the motion. The motion passes. Our next motion is the motion to ratify the updated standing committee membership. The motion reads, be it resolved that council ratify the updated 2024-2025 standing committees. Can I please have a seconder to introduce the motion? Counselor, sorry, I can't see it, Anand. Are there any questions? Are there any points of debate? Are there any objections? Okay, please proceed to Echo 360 to vote. Yes, Councillor John. That's odd. Okay. What standing committee are you on?
I'm in governance and finance.
Motion to amend. I'm on a governance and standing committee twice.
Okay, sorry, we got to take one at a time. So can you please, so if you're not on it, can you make a motion to amend?
Motion to amend on governance and finance to add Hussein Jan.
Can I please have a seconder? Councillor Sarofiem? Are there any questions regarding the amendment? Are there any objections to the amendment? Okay, we will now vote on the amendment. Can you please raise your placard if you are for the amendment? Thank you, Council. Please raise your placard if you abstain from the amendment. And please raise your placard if you reject the amendment. Okay, the amendment passes. And then Councillor Chai, yes?
Motion to amend. I'm on a governance and finance twice.
Can I please have a seconder to introduce? Councillor Ijam? Are there any questions regarding the amendment? Are there any points of debate regarding the amendment? And are there any objections regarding the amendment? Okay, by show of placard, if you move to approve the amendment, please raise your placard. Thank you, councillors. If you are choosing to abstain to the amendment, please raise your placard. And if you reject the amendment, please raise your placard. Okay, thank you. Are there any other amendments to be made at this time? Are there any objections? Okay. If you haven't already done so, please go to Echo 360 to vote on the motion with the amendments included. The motion passes. Our next two motions will have their first reading, and councillors may ask questions regarding the motions. The first one is the motion to approve the USC Pedestrian Safety and Transit Position Paper. The motion reads, whereas transit and pedestrian safety is an issue that affects all students and staff at Western, whereas the USC's transit policy and pedestrian safety policy are expired and outdated, whereas updated recommendations must be utilized in our advocacy to Western, the city, and the provincial and federal governments, be it resolved that Council pass the pedestrian safety and transit position paper. Can I please have a seconder for the motion? Councillor Parisius. Are there any questions regarding the motion? Are there any amendments to the motion to be made? Are there any objections? Okay. Seeing as there are no questions to be made at this time, we will move on. The next motion for its first reading is the Human Rights-Based Divestment motion. The motion reads, whereas responsible investment is integral to Western University's values and the USC's mission of ethical governance, whereas on May 2nd, 2024, the UN Working Group on Business and Human Rights presented a report urging investors to integrate human rights considerations into their environmental, social, and governance and sustainability approaches to align them with the UN guiding principles on business and human rights. Whereas human rights considerations should form a critical component of responsible investing practices. Whereas ongoing university investments in companies allegedly violating human rights standards could undermine Western's commitment to ethical practices. Be it resolved that the USC formally advocates that Western University incorporate human rights considerations into its investment policy, specifically divesting from companies that engage in or are complicit in human rights abuses as defined by the United Nations standards, including but not limited to weapons manufacturers. Be it further resolved that the USC conducts a campus-wide survey poll on this issue, which includes the question, open quote, should the University Students' Council advocate that Western University incorporate human rights considerations into its investment policy, specifically divesting from companies that engage in or are complicit in human rights abuses as defined by the United Nations standards, including but not limited to weapons manufacturers, close quote. Be it further resolved, the USC runs a minimum 2-week informational campaign that begins a minimum of 1 week before the release of the survey to provide students with information to make an educated response. Be it further resolved that the USC will bring the findings of the survey and their formal recommendations forward to significant university stakeholders. Can I please have a seconder? Councillor Ejam. Point of information. Can I please have a seconder to introduce the point of information? Councillor Ejam.
All right. Hello, everyone. So I'm going to give some quick context for this motion. So I'm very happy to speak about this motion today, which I believe represents a significant opportunity for us as the University Student Council to take a principled stance on an issue that resonates deeply with our student body, human rights and ethical investment. Western University current responsible investing policy incorporates environmental, social, and governance principles. However, it does not specifically address human rights considerations, a crucial area in ensuring that our university's investments align with its stated values. This motion asks the USC to advocate to Western to incorporate human rights standards into its investment policy, specifically focusing on companies that are involved in or complicit in human rights abuses. These abuses include, but are not limited to, actions such as weapons manufacturing or violations of international law. This motion positions the USC as a leader in responsible and ethical investing. This issue is not abstract. It is deeply tied to our university community and our shared values. Through consultations with over 200 students across faculties, it's become evident that students care deeply about where Western invests its money. Many feel strongly that their voices must be heard on this matter, especially given the visible activism on campus around human rights and divestment issues. By passing this motion, we align ourselves with Western's historical commitment to ethical investment. Now is the time to extend these principles to include human rights considerations, which are just as vital to ethical governance. This motion does 3 key things. Number 1, it creates a mandate on the USC to formally advocate that Western integrates human rights considerations into its investment policy and divest from companies complicit in abuses. Number 2, it proposes that the USC conducts a survey to gather broader and comprehensive input on Western's investing and provide students a medium to explicitly voice their opinions on the topic, something the students' population has been asking for many months. Lastly, number 3, it instructs the USC to develop an informational-based campaign with a minimum length of 2 weeks where they provide students with enough information to make an educated response. This approach allows us to balance advocacy with transparency and inclusivity. The survey ensures that students across campus have the opportunity to engage with this issue, while the USC takes a leadership role in articulating the ethical concerns tied to university investments. In conclusion, this motion is more than just investments. It's about ensuring that our university embodies the values we, as a student body, hold dear. By supporting this motion, we send a clear message that the USC is committed to ethical governance, transparency, and student representation. This motion takes a meaningful step towards aligning Western's investment with human rights and social responsibility. Thank you. If you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer those.
Are there any questions for the motion at this time? Councillor Sharma. Wait, can you please speak into the mic?
Just for clarification, will you be doing another student poll after the motion passes?
So how this currently is going to, if this motion passes, will then be able to mandate the USC to formally advocate for this. And then we're going to have a survey later on in the new year asking individuals for more comprehensive feedback. And then we can use that to also take that to Western's admin and show them this is what your student body wants.
Are there any other questions for this motion? Councillor Chai.
I just wanted to ask, what exactly do you want to do about incorporating the human rights policy into this investment policy? So do you mean withdrawing from the investment completely, or is there a protocol such as finding an alternative investments before withdrawing? And how will Western ensure that this policy is financially feasible?
Go ahead, Councillor John. Yeah.
Thank you. So with my consultations, what I have understood it as and what I've been told, so as a board of governors, they manage how Western allocates its money into different portfolios. They have an investment committee that is a subcommittee of property finance. In it, you can give mandates to different, your money managers who actually allocate the money on what sort of companies you want the money going into. This mandate can be whatever you wish it to be, since it is your money. So in this case, if Western takes this approach and they listen to our advocacy, if this motion passes, then they send that mandate to their money managers. Over the next year or two, so it is a slower process, what they end up doing is to start slowly taking money out of those accounts and they allocate them into other accounts. So they don't do it overnight, so there's no financial instability. But it happens over the next few years, if that answers your question. Yeah.
Are there any other questions regarding the motion? Councillor, sorry, I can't see it. Can you say it? Sorry, into the mic. Sharma. Oh, okay.
Another one. Regarding the motion, there's no specific location or kind of, it's very vague in terms of when you say international law, there's no specific location or specific kind of premise that we're kind of, it's kind of very general and all-encompassing in terms of human rights abuses. I was wondering if this motion could list an example of, like in the motion we could list an example of a specific location that is violating international law, or will it stay generally vague?
Thank you, Councillor.
That's a great question. So as for location, there is no specific location in the sense that this is more so than general of any company, anywhere in the world, if they are violating human rights or international law, they shouldn't be funded by our money or by Western's money. As far as one point I will bring up is that as far as the vagueness of what is international law, what are human rights? That's such a good question. And a quick context here. So what happened was at our subcommittee, we had some amendments to this motion. And what ended up happening was that I will bring this up at our next meeting because it is an amendment. But at the very end, there will be an appendix that tells exactly which guidelines from the UN we're talking about. So that comes up as UN guiding principles on business and human rights. That will be added into this motion on our amendment. That is the concrete guidelines we're talking about. As for the location, anywhere on earth, if you are violating human rights, you are violating human rights.
Are there any other questions regarding the motion? Okay, seeing as there are no further questions for the motion, I now motion to adjourn the meeting and resume on December 4th at 7 p.m. Can I please have a mover? Councillor Chai and Councillor Gleed for the seconder. The meeting is adjourned at 7:58 p.m. Have a great night, everyone.
Let's go.